I got Grandia 1 and 2 on the Switch on Friday. There was a part of me that was not going to get it on the Switch because, like I could already emulate these games. Like I've already played Grandia 1 back in the day. And I saw some like texture smoothing filter they applied to some of the characters in Grandia 1 that I wasn't a fan of. And I was like, $40 for digital. Like there was lots of things going through my head. Like, you don't need to buy this. You're still trying to get through Fire Emblem Three Houses. But I don't know. Like I was just like, I'm going to do it. Like Friday night, I was like, I'm going to buy this game. So of course, obviously I bought it, downloaded it. And I initially just jumped into Grandia 2 because I had already played Grandia 1 a fair bit back when I was a kid on the PlayStation. And I wanted to get into Grandia 2 because I had never played. I didn't know anything about Grandia 2. I'd seen a little bit of like gameplay footage, but that's about it. I didn't know anything about the story or anything. And so I wanted to jump into something I've never played before. And the idea was going to be that Eric was going to talk about Grandia 1. So he was playing that one, but I ended up touching them both. But man, I played the most of Grandia 2, and I'll start off with that. Grandia 2 is unexpectedly good to me. I've heard a lot of people kind of compare it to like a slightly above average RPG. So I didn't really have too many high hopes for Grandia 2. And I've just been, I don't want to say blown away, but I was pleasantly surprised. First off, on the remaster or HD remaster, there was a version already on Steam, but they just basically ported that over and did some more work with it. But it does look very, very sharp. I do think of the remasters between the two games, I think Grandia 1 is a more substantial remaster than Grandia 2. I think if they cut costs anywhere, it was probably in Grandia 2's remaster because they already had a PC version that they could just bring over. And I say that because there are some things that I've noticed with it that are a little off the mark for me. For example, during the game, they'll have these avatars of the characters, during story sequences and such. And some of the avatars of the characters are a little low res compared to other ones, which is not an issue in Grandia 1. And apparently the reason for that is because it was really difficult. It would be really difficult for them to fix that with the way it was coded in Grandia 2. And it was just more hassle than it would be worth, I guess. Apparently, that's basically what I read online from one of the people that worked on this. So that was kind of an interesting remark. There's also other things too with it. And I'm going to get into some really positive stuff, but I just want to get some of the negative stuff out of the way first. But there's some other things I've noticed too, like with the voice acting. I feel like in Grandia 1, there's a substantial upgrade in the audio department. They haven't re-recorded the lines, but they did it sounds like some remastering of it. Whereas in Grandia 2, it still sounds pretty good. Maybe they just thought, okay, this is a later generation game. We don't really need to put as much work into it, but you can clearly tell that the original version had these like super compressed audio files to try to like make up for space on the disc. So like it's a lower quality audio file that a lot of the voice acting is on. So right. It doesn't bother me because, and Stan, it probably wouldn't bother you because, we grew up in that time frame. So it's, it's almost kind of nostalgic, but I think for somebody that's coming into it brand new, it might be something to get used to. And it's the same thing with the music too. The music's great, but I can tell that like the audio format for the music, it's a little lower. They just compressed it to make it a smaller file size, which it was fine back then, but I was kind of disappointed they didn't do a little bit more work with that. And there's some other things too. I've noticed occasionally, like once in a blue moon, I played like 10 hours of it. So maybe like once an hour, I might find an area where I can noticeably tell there was a little bit of a frame drop from the character running in this particular part, which was a little odd because I'm sure the Switch can easily handle this game. But I mean, other than that, it does look really, really sharp.
They put it in widescreen, right? Yeah. Without stretching anything.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. I'm glad you brought that up because I totally forgot. It's totally a widescreen. Nothing looks super stretched out or anything. Nothing looks odd. They give you the option to listen in English and Japanese. I know that's an option on Grandia 1. I can't remember for Grandia 2. I just left it on English for Grandia 2 because I just want to get used to the way it was when everyone else played it back in the day. But yeah, I mean, it's overall, I think it's a net positive port. I wouldn't say emulating the game would be better than buying this version of the game. I think this is better than what you would get if you emulated the game. So I do think this is overall a net positive port of Grandia 2. Given I've never played the game, I've been pleasantly surprised with the story. Like, it's actually very, very engaging. Basically, you start off as this person who's basically kind of like a mercenary or a bounty hunter type character. He's actually kind of a dick. Like, your main character is a dick. Like, it's really interesting because he's just not very sympathetic to people, and he's just, all he cares about is the money. But he gets really wrapped up in this story, and there's so much world building and so much getting to know the other characters and really nuanced stuff that is really, really enjoyable for me to sink my teeth into. And it's got an absolutely sick battle system. If anyone has never played a Grandia battle system, it's definitely turn-based, but there's a ton of timing involved because it's got this little meter in the corner, and I got some of it on the screen here. I just paused during the trailer, but there's this meter, and on the left-hand side, it's blue, and on the right-hand side, it's red. And when the enemy's icon is in the red part, if you attack the enemy with a critical move under, it's called, basically, it's called critical, you click on it, right? If you select an enemy that's in their icon's in the red, you'll actually prevent them from attacking, and their meter will go back some. But if you attack them with critical in the left hand side, it still goes down, but it's not really doing anything as much as it would if it was in the red. In the red, it could go all the way back down to 0. So this is really important because, especially for boss battles, you'll notice that a lot of the bosses hit hard. Like one of the early bosses was doing like 180 damage, and most of my party had like 300 HP. So, and like this was like their normal hit. So you had to take care of that situation. So I had 3 people in my party, and I'm trying to like navigate this battle, and I kept having all two of them just continue critical hit after critical hit to prevent him from attacking. And then I'm having the one leftover member, I'm having them actually do more high damage moves because the boss had like 8,000 HP and critical hits were only doing like 80 damage. So I can't sit there and do that the whole battle, but it does pause when it's your turn to choose. But I mean, there's a lot of timing involved and a lot of planning, and there's so many different options for you to like engage the enemy with, just between like magic and combos. And it's really fun. And when it's not your, like when you're not able to choose an ability to attack, it's actually like your characters are like running around the field and stuff, and like there's actually something else to look at besides four guys on the right side and four enemies on the left side just staring at each other, waiting for their ATB bar to fill. So it's more
dynamic.
Yeah, dude, it's really good. And what's really cool is when you choose some of the special moves, a lot of them will have these like sweet, like cell shaded FMVs, and it just like flows into them like seamlessly. Like it's just like you're in your regular gameplay, and all of a sudden everything just like dissolves back into this like cell shaded FMV. It's really, really cool. So I'm really liking Grandia 2 a lot more than I thought I was going to. So I'm like really happy that I picked this up. On the Grandia 1 front, I played the game a decent amount when I was a kid. I never owned it, but I rented it a couple times, and I remember enjoying it back then. I was like 11, and I'm 30 now. So we're talking like 19 years of memory gap here. But I've played a couple hours of it this weekend just to kind of see what the differences were, and man, I got so many mixed feelings about Grandia 1. I mean, oh boy.
It's more of a happy-go-lucky affair. At least early on is the vibe I got from it.
Yeah, it's really happy-go-lucky. That's a good way of saying it. It's it starts off with one of my pet peeves as a bunch of kids, which I don't like when games do that. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it was just like Final Fantasy Tactics Advance all over again. You know, like I'm just like, God, no, please. But
Right.
you know, it's a journey. It's about an adventure that you're going on an adventure. You know, I think one of the reasons I usually don't like games that focus on little kids like that is, at least in the beginning of the game, is because I feel like a lot of it is just like amateur storytelling, and it's just like I feel like I'm the wrong target audience for this, right? But this is actually really well written stuff. I mean, Grandia is so special because they really focused a lot on the storytelling, because you can travel around like even like the first introductory town, and you can like just go up to like tons of objects. The character will talk about it, but they'll say things like, oh, this reminds me of my father. There was this time that we did this and we did that. Like, and like, it's just like you can sink your teeth into this whole world that this game is building, and everything's so interconnected, and it's just really, really well made. Even from like a technical standpoint, the game was really special on, well, the best version apparently came out in the Sega Saturn, but we, you know, over here in the West, we only got the PlayStation version as far as I'm aware. But even then, like it was really, it did a lot of really cool like 3D stuff. For example, in a lot of the towns, they really force you to use the camera to turn 360 degrees, because there'll be doors to buildings that are only on the other side of the building. You know, why wouldn't a door be, why would all the doors in a town be on the same side? That makes no sense, right? So they have stuff like that where if you're not using the camera, you'll not be able to find an entrance to a house. And so really cool stuff in the 90s that they were doing here. Great soundtrack. The voice acting is horrendous, but it's, you know,
It was a product of its time.
yeah, like come on. Like it's
Back then the novelty was the game has voice acting. Right?
right.
Not that it's actually good. It was like, here's a game that has voice acting. That was impressive, you know, back in the late SNES and early PS1 days.
Yeah,
people point out like Metal Gear Solid as great voice acting, which it is, but that was an anomaly, right? The vast majority of games that had voice acting back then were closer to the quality you'll find in like a Grandia game.
Well, and that's the thing. Well, first off, I was replaying Metal Gear Solid like a month or two ago, and I forgot how good the voice acting was. I was like, Jesus, like this is exceptional. But yeah, you're not getting that quality of voice acting, and a lot of it honestly is not the voice actor's fault. I don't think. I was telling, I think BioPhoenix on our Discord server, he's been a guest on this podcast a few times. We're kind of chatting about it a little bit. That what it seems like to me is different actors would record in like different environments. So like one person might record in like a recording studio. So like it sounds like, you know, they were trying to be a voice actor. Then it sounds like another person like read a script in like a kitchen. So it's like you have that effect that sounds like they're talking in a can, you know, like, and it's just like, it doesn't need to sound like that. Why, you know, so,
unfortunate,
or maybe they weren't all using the same microphones. But what you said is exactly right. Like back then, like it was just a novelty that a game even had voice acting. Like the quality wasn't even a concern. So
Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 on the PlayStation don't have voice acting. I don't think any of Square Enix's games, Squaresoft's games at the time, had voice acting on PS1. I could be wrong about that, but
thank God for that too.
None are coming to mind.
I don't think any of those Final Fantasy 7 through 9 in particular, and Tactics, would be as well remembered if they had voice acting, because given how crappy the localization was for 7 in particular, I guarantee you the voice acting on that game would have been abysmal.
Yeah.
It would have been terrible, because they would do the localization in like 3 weeks. So the voice acting would, for the entire game, would probably be like an afternoon or something, you know? So, but anyways, so the Grandia, they have again, English and Japanese option for the voice acting, so you can switch to Japanese. And I haven't tried that, but I've heard that's a little bit better. And I don't think it takes away from the game at all. It's definitely very tolerable. It's, you know, I've definitely heard worse for sure. I think the most annoying thing with Grandia 1 that I've noticed, and this is where it's like a hit or miss with me, they applied this like texture smoothing filter to the game to make it look a little less jaggedy from the pixel art, because this game had like 3D, like a 3D world that was like cell shaded almost. It wasn't really cell shaded, but it, by today's standards, it looks kind of cell shaded. But then the characters were more like pixel art type based, right? Well, they applied the annoying smoothing filter that you might see in, like, for example, when they first released Chrono Trigger on Steam, everyone was all pissed off. It looks like they applied that filter to this as well, but they were a lot more subtle with it and a lot more nuanced with it. So when you're running around town and stuff, I think the character sprites actually look pretty sharp. It actually looks pretty good, I think. But when like the camera zooms in on them, like it just like, oh God, like no, like no, this looks terrible.
Go back.
Yeah, go back to before. Like, so I'm just like, that's why I'm like, it's like hit or miss. But apparently they applied the same effect to the background, the world itself. And like, if you see some of the like town and stuff in this, right here on the screen, I think this is what it was before, I don't know. But now, like right here, like Jesus, this looks so good. Like I was playing it the other day and I was just like, man, this just looks phenomenal. It reminded me a lot of, I was playing also an HD, I think HD remaster on Steam of Legend of Heroes, Trails in the Sky. And like, I don't know, like it, like I kind of was getting kind of that vibe from like the way it looked. And the comment probably just irritated like about 10 people out there. But
well, I think it's a pretty good comparison. Like Trails in the Sky is kind of this type of game, right? Like if you like one, there's a pretty good chance I think you would like the other, or at least give the other a chance. They're both about kids going on an adventure, so
yeah, maybe that's what it is. But I was just getting like vibes like that because both of those games really like spend a lot of time with you talking to different people and you know, like really like getting invested in the characters. That's the type of stuff like I just eat up and ask for seconds. So
very detailed, yeah.
Yeah, I really, really appreciated it. So both are really good versions. I think they spent a little bit more time on Grandia 1 just because that has never had any treatment, whereas Grandia 2, at least on PC, had some treatment. They obviously did some more. But one thing I forgot to mention, though, that's really cool with Grandia 1, this is based off the Sega Saturn version, whereas most people in the West, they played the PlayStation version. The PlayStation version, apparently, I didn't know this, but it was missing a little bit of content. I'm not familiar enough with the entirety of Grandia 1 to like point these differences out while I'm playing. Apparently this has all the Sega Saturn content, and it's been, the localization is from the Sega Saturn version. It's not just a port of the PlayStation version. And the Sega Saturn version is supposed to be the best version. So this is in many ways like the best way I think to play the game, which is really cool because a lot of times, you know, you think like I could just emulate this and I could get basically the same experience. But I think for both these games, they did enough stuff where it's just, you feel that like there's more here than you would be able to get if you downloaded or emulated it. So definitely recommend picking these up and checking it out. Even with some of the negative issues I said, I think it's overall like a very much a net positive.